Rebekah Lyons, thank you for being on the Aro Podcast. We're really excited. I got super excited preparing for this because resilience is something that I'm working on all the time. And it's something for my kids that we're really trying to instill. And so it just hit me there. And the great thing for me is I don't have to do any of the research now. You've done it for us. So thank you. So I'm very excited about that.
The nerd side of me is very grateful for that compliment.
Absolutely. It's very fun. So I want to dive into your new book. So May 2nd, your book releases, your newest book, Building a Resilient Life, How Adversity Awakens Strength, Hope, and Meaning. Will you tell us about the title and subtitle? Just dive right into it and hear about this, the title and the subtitle, both. The subtitle's really rich.
Oh, yeah. Well, I really was researching adversity. That's how this all began. I just walked, a lot of people walking through really hard things. And I've touched on grief and suffering and things in prior books. I mean, I had panic disorder 12 years ago, and that was my first kind of reckoning with trial that was big. I mean, I wouldn't say my first. Obviously, I had a son with Down syndrome in my 20s, and then panic disorder in my 30s, and my dad passed in my 40s. And so we've all known pain. Like that's not new information. But what I found was that in the last 3 years with COVID, I think I realized I wasn't as resilient as I thought. And resilience is on a continuum. It's not a fixed state. Like that person's resilience or that person's resilient and that person's not. It's actually really more that person's demonstrating resilience in this season because they are actually putting the tools or the rules of resilience that I talk about in the book into their life. And so it just like the rhythms book was very much like, if you're not doing this, if you're not like mental health, this is not a theory, it's a practice. So if you're not doing these things, you're going to start to see fallout. And this is not me just giving everybody marching orders, but what it is more is to give a framework. Like these are the building blocks for a resilient life. And so that's why I wanted it to be called Building a Resilient Life. Like we're always in process. We're a work in progress. And when trial or trauma comes, how we respond is very much indicated on what have we set in place prior to that? What have we been paying attention to? Have we been honest? And so the building I love because it means it's just like rhythm. It's just a life. It's the life that you're living, that you're going to continue to live in a certain way because it's the way you see the world. And it's the way you believe that with faith that God is like, Jesus says, in this world, you will have trouble, but take heart, I've overcome the world. So there's this understanding that we're going to experience so much pain, so much loss, so much. And I just start the book talking about ambiguous loss, right? Pauline Boss coined that phrase back in the 80s, that the ambiguous loss was almost like loss without an end date. Maybe you would have chronic loss. For me, I start the book with a story of my son at 22 years old with Down syndrome and having the hardest year of his life and my hardest year as a mother in 22 years. And I wouldn't have saw that coming, but COVID had a part of that. Isolation, moving, changing schools, bringing a new baby sister home from China, kind of just upending everything for a largely nonverbal young man who didn't have a category for that or a way to even communicate that. And so it just kind of set me back on a journey of going, wow, I don't even know how to be what he needs because I'm realizing that his spiral is creating my spiral. And it was just such a grace, honestly, for God to meet me in that place and go, I'm not as resilient as I thought I was, even though I have had hard things. I mean, resilience grows when you have this kind of steady incremental growth of novelty, right? Like kids venture out and it's a little activates their stress response because it's new and they've never done it. And then they have the care and compassion of a caregiver and cheering them on like parents, like you did it. Yay. Now, then they retreat and then they feel a little more confident. The next day they march back out a little further. Yay, you did it. We're here. Keep going. And then so novelty is a very good thing. It builds resilience, but you have to do it in measured doses and you have to do it with the people who love you and support you, encouraging you. And so you want to activate that stress response. That's the only way you build resilience. You want to do hard things. You just need to do them in measured ways consistently so that resilience can grow. And what happened with 2020 is we went from 0 to 100 overnight. And there was no measured way to approach resilience, which is why so many tweens, quite frankly, I had suicidal ideation 1 in 3 within about 12 weeks. They went from all to nothing. It's a global pandemic. Everyone go home. Everyone shut down. Everyone isolate. Everyone sit on your hands. You have no agency to affect change. Just be fearful, right? And so I think what that did for so many of us is that we felt powerless. We lost agency. And it was the first global crisis where mental health declined than any other war. I just did history, like in past wars, mental health would increase because it would give people a sense of solidarity, a sense of purpose, a sense of meaning, a sense of honor. And this time it just sent us the opposite direction, because we were isolated and alone, and the terms kept changing, and we had no agency to affect any of that. And so that really sent me on this long journey of doing research on the brain and trauma and what we're made of and what we're capable of and why we're here. And when we're acting with agency and we make meaning, and I'll go through those rules shortly, then all of a sudden we're back on track. We're able to look at COVID differently, or look at a global pandemic differently, or look at parenting, raising resilient kids differently. We have more information now that we know what to do with.
How would you, it's interesting, you talk about the fast onset of COVID and how that we weren't prepared for it. I don't know how it would be hard to prepare for that in general, but do you think because it was so quick, because it was so fast, was it even harder to build resilience through it because it was so fast of an onset? Does that make sense?
Yeah, because if you go into a massive trauma quickly, it's like a school shooting, right? Like you're in survival, fight or flight, like oversensitized stress response, right? As you should. I mean, that's an appropriate response. Your body is acting as if you're being held at gunpoint. The amygdala goes off, the fight, flight, or freeze goes off. Like you're in survival mode. And quite frankly, you do okay in that mode. It's when the release happens that you crash and you realize how much you were holding it together. And so that's why 2021 got harder than 2020.
Yeah.
And even 22, like things are going back to normal, but why am I languishing? Why do I feel lost? Why do I not know what to do with what just happened? That's really, the body is just acting as it should. The brain goes into hypervigilance mode because the adrenaline begins, the cortisol is shooting, the stress hormone, you are activating that stress response. The problem is it was prolonged for 2 years. Right. So imagine having a panic attack on an elevator for 2 years. Like your brain is not supposed to feel that like just high alert vigilance, hypervigilance for that long. Again, to build resilience, you're supposed to have small, steady doses of like stress response in conditioned ways with support. And then that's like athletics, that's performance, that's like stepping foot on a stage. I mean, this is a good thing. Kids are taught resilience in school just by being on a sports team and having to practice and do hard things, or public speaking, or learn an instrument, or vocals. Like all that develops resilience because it's this patterned, consistent, pushing yourself just enough to learn a little bit more, to grow a little bit more, to gain a little more confidence, retreat for a pause, and then go back out and do it again. And that was not COVID. COVID was the opposite of all of that. Absolutely. And I think that's why it did reveal me thinking I was writing this book for our kids and like, oh, they've just not really known hard. Well, they have known hard, but this was an onslaught. And it's not, and that's what also really messed with us, is that this wasn't hard in the way that would have activated agency and nobility, right? Like in wartime in the past, so many people found a sense of meaning attached to what they were going out and fighting for. And in this lockdown, we couldn't make sense of any of it. And there was nothing you could do to fix anything. Yes. It was almost like the only thing you could do was do nothing and wait. And trust me, we are not people who are made to sit around and wait when when the house is on fire.
Yeah.
We're not wired for that. No human is going like, I'm just going to sit here and do nothing until I'm told what to do next while the house is on fire.
Yeah.
And so that became very debilitating for a lot of people, for adults in particular, but then for kids, because they lost their friends, they lost their community. And historically, trauma has always been healed through the centuries, long before technical revolution, has always been healed through commitment and tethering to a tribe or a clan, like deeply embedded in community, regulating rhythms of movement, like actual moving your legs, doing physical hard labor. The third thing would be belief, accessing your belief, your core beliefs, your power outside of yourself, and then doing behavioral therapy to help modify that. And then the fourth and very last thing would be like some sort of, natural remedies, like not natural remedies, like that would help you like chemically in your brain, which is now pharmacology. And so that historically for centuries, I mean, we're not the first generation that's experienced trauma. Like this actually quantifies as not a big trauma when you look at like the real physical trauma that people have endured for centuries. So why was this so debilitating? Well, it's because we in this generation have only focused on the last two things. We've started with like psychopharmacology, like medication. And then the second thing is cognitive behavioral therapy. So you're in talk therapy and you're processing your stuff. But meanwhile, we're ignoring the first two things that historically have been the most proven, which is community, like clan or tribe, like you belong and you're known in every mode of life. And then the other one would be that you have regulatory rhythms in your life. That's why I wrote Rhythms of Renewal, that you are actually just living a life of movement. And we are hardwired for movement, but instead we're the most sedentary generation and the most isolated generation. And both of those have began most dominantly in the 15 years since the invention of the iPhone. So it's unfortunate that I'm not hating technology. It's helping us have this conversation right now. We just need to understand that we are beta testing a new version of humanity, and the outcomes are not looking that good.
Right. You're preaching to me here now. I mean, this is I'm writing this down. We're beta testing a new version of humanity, and the outcomes don't look so good now. That is very powerful, and it's so true. And you're right. I mean, talk about early a quick onset with technology and how it's overtaken us. When you talk about resilience, will you tell me and you go in this will you tell me really exactly what it is? What is resilience, and what is resilience not? What are those two things? Because they're cousins, right? And then but one is not the other.
Yeah, absolutely. This was really fascinating for me when because I love the research. I have to say, I don't know why, I just do. I never thought I would get into this. So I have the book here, and I'll just reference it because I'll read it better than I'll say it. And for those of you who are interested, I thought it was really important to know what is resilience really, because we have these aspirational ideas of resilience, like, that we're just not shaken, that we bounce back, but what I learned more studying it, if more than 4 decades of living have taught me anything, it's that the ones who bounce back might not be the most resilient. It's the people who've weathered storms throughout the entirety of their lives, who stayed when it would have been easier to leave, who lived with integrity and commitment, who've both resumed their original shape, but also undergone an internal transformation. These are the resilient ones. And it really came from this definition. The original definition in the Oxford English Dictionary was in 1627, and it was from the Latin word resilere, which means to recoil or rebound. And then the second definition was added in 1824, associated with the power of resuming the original shape or position after compressing or bending, etc. And popular culture limits this definition to people who bounce back. And while I appreciate this, I see it broader. This assumes that we are people who are bounced against a wall and retrieve, bounce against a wall and retrieve without eventually becoming cracked or deflated and how I wish that were true, but that's just not the truth. We don't walk through hardship and are unscathed, just because we have this naive optimism. I say we are not people who simply bounce back. We experience all kinds of trouble, tragedy, loss, both of which can take a lifetime to heal. We develop wounds and scars. Resilient people experience this pain with honesty and bravery, and they become stronger, not despite the resistance, but because of the resistance. And so then I go on to say that I might define resilience this way. It's our daily consecrated act of remembering there's something far greater than our present troubles, which offers us the power to endure and emerge. This something greater is, talked about in scripture. So as a person of faith, it was important for me to go, okay, so if we're not ones who just bounce back blindly because we're like strong, then I went back to the Aesop's fable of the oak and the reed, and how the oak is standing tall and so strong. And like, we do see that as a modern picture of resilience. Oak trees are pretty resilient. But what happens with the oak and the reed is the storm is coming, and he's very boastful. He's like, don't you wish you were like me, basically? And the reed is like, no, I'm kind of content with my lot. And then the storm rages, the reed bends low because the reed is nimble, and the oak is overturned and the root ball is up on the ground. And what I realized is like, it's not a new kind of resilience. I would call it a holy kind of resilience, where Jesus throughout the scriptures was called the bruised reed, and Isaiah prophesies about him. And then this reed is one that bends low, right? And weathers the storm and endures the cross and experiences resurrection, right? Like, he had to submit to the storm. Like, he didn't really want this. We don't want pain to happen, but there is a way of weathering a storm that's nimble, that's humble, that's surrendered, that trusts. And so I found when adversity would come, I could resist it. And the theme of the book is like, don't run from pain, turn toward it, but turn toward it in a bending, lowering, a humble way, because in that you have victory, in that you actually access something beyond yourself, and you find your legs to stand up again. You're not like as if nothing ever happened. I liked the definition of resilience being like a Nerf ball that's compressed and then it comes back to the original shape, right? But when you think about all of us, what in our life has been like a season of compression where you've just been squeezed? Yeah. There's some times in our lives, whether it's a cancer diagnosis or a special needs child or a life, like being unemployed for a season, that there's not a time limit to that compression. So we're being kind of restricted or constrained. And I think there are lives where we will walk through some sort of trouble that doesn't always have an end date. And so it's not easy to bounce back from something that you actually have to walk through with integrity and just let that be what it is and surrender to it. And so I found like when hardship would come and it might linger, like maybe you have a wayward child or you have a marriage that is like falling apart and you're just trying to be faithful in that place. We all want it to just be solved immediately, but that's just not real. That's not real life. And COVID was an expression of this, like, this is long, it's extenuating circumstances, and it doesn't seem to be ending. And even now, we've got wars and rumors of wars. We still have shootings. We still have trauma. Like, it's not going to go away, right? Not at least in this moment, not in the way we see it in our lifetime. But what we do know is that hope does arise out of it, because you find that you still have legs to stand back up, and you don't resume exactly who I was, right? I look like the same Rebekah, but I've got some wrinkles. I've got scars from 3 cesarean C-sections from having my kids. Like, I'm a little more weathered, and yet there's a growth and a seasoning and a maturity and a strength that comes from walking through hard things and not resisting those things, but bending in the wake of them so that I can learn, that I can grow, I can offer something of my experience with pain to someone else. And so I guess in short, it's like resilience is getting comfortable with pain, not intimidated by it or shying away from it, But then in the comfort of it, being able to be comforted, and then having the courage and the ability to comfort someone else, and realizing like even the mental health crisis that we're in on the back end of a global pandemic is just as damaging as the pandemic itself. And I feel more equipped than ever, having walked through my own personal things that I've had to overcome, to serve and love and strengthen and embolden. And we can't really carry what we haven't already received. And so part of the point of pain is it will become purpose if you let it. And there will be a lot of meaning attached to that as you find ways to contribute and give to somebody else.
You just said one of the most poignant lines of chapter 2, which was pain always becomes purpose if you let it. And I read that and it stopped me in my tracks. And I contrasted that with this, the line that like everything happens for a reason, which I don't like that line to begin with. Like, I think reason can come out of things like the purpose becomes clear, but and I put in all caps, pain always becomes purpose if you let it. And if you're looking for that, it's like have you ever heard the Andy Grammer song, Wish You Pain?
Yes, it's not for a long time though.
Oh, it's fantastic. But it's a song to the kids, like wishing them pain because you know what comes out of pain. Yeah. As brutal as it may be. But that concept of pain always becoming purpose if you let it, I think is one of the most powerful concepts to me. And if you have that mindset, like, and you said earlier, we don't look the same after adversity. And thank God we don't, because we have a scar that we can look at and is a reminder to us, like, I've been through a storm before. I can fight through this again because I've done it before. It's just that reminder that we've been that way. So it's a good thing we have scars, whether they're physical or emotional. So that was, if nothing else for that book, just that line, pain always becomes purpose if you let it. I love that. And I also love, Rebekah, this, you talked about it earlier on the continuum of resilience. It's not like you reach this point of resilience and you define it as that daily consecrated act. It is the doing of resilience that is resilience, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
You talk about this tension between the now and the not yet, which I really, really like that. Will you expound on that concept just a little bit?
Yeah, because we, like I was saying earlier, we sit in longing. We sit and we long for everything to be made right. And what we don't really understand is like, we're part of that. Actually, we get to be invited into that. God doesn't need us, but he delights in us, and he invites us to join him in being a part of the renewal of all things. Like, we are image bearers. We carry, the book is really based on 2 Corinthians 4:8, where we're pressed and we're crushed, but we're not destroyed. We're perplexed, but we're not given to despair. Why? Because we carry light shining in our hearts, which is Christ and his Spirit. And that is why we never give up. So it's almost this beautiful promise of going, yeah, you're just going to walk through it now. You're going to walk through hard things. We all know this. And yet we know we fix our eyes on what is unseen for what is unseen, because what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. And that whole chapter really just jarred me, because I thought, this is it. Like, come what may, Christ has already said, I have the final word. I have the final say. And so, yes, faith is infused in this holy resilience. It's not just this pull yourself up by your bootstraps humanistic version of like, man is real, because we know like man is this life, right, as we know it, is fleeting. We don't know the number of days we each have. And so there is something more to call toward, to something that's redeemed fully, in ways we won't see. I lost my dad to Parkinson's 5 years ago this week. And he was a man who feared God, but also struggled with some form of chronic depression throughout his adult life. And yet there would be glimpses of glory, like throughout that season as well. And I knew, like, as he passed, the veil was so thin that final weekend. It was Easter weekend. So it's always this time of year that it comes up. And just how, like, okay, God, like, you make all things new. all things new, and death always precedes resurrection.
Mm.
And so like death stinks. Like nobody really wants death of whatever it is, death of a dream. I quote that liturgy in the book. Nobody
Yes.
wants death of relationships. Nobody wants death of life, obviously. But there is always something that's redeemed on the other side of that. And we see that in real time, but then we'll see it in the fullness. And so the not yet, I think, is an invitation to going, acknowledge what is right now with the promise of what is to come, that faith is what you can't see, but what you decide, what you choose to believe. And then in that gap, go, what am I going to do with what I have in front of me? Yeah. How am I going to faithfully steward this tension? Going, God, what are the assignments that you have on my life for today, for tomorrow? I don't need to know the whole thing. I'm probably better not knowing, but will you guide my steps today? Show me where to go, who to encounter. Give me the words you'd like me to say. Help me choose gratitude, see your gifts as they are right in front of me, not lose sight of that. What is gifted today? And it's a holy invitation to actually be one who joins God in redeeming what breaks our hearts. And so calling is very much where our deep gladness, Buchner says, where our deep gladness meets the world's deep need. And so for me, it might be writing and teaching about the deep need of mental health in our nation. That to me is my role in the now and the not yet. That's the assignment. And everyone, as we slowly let our pain become purpose, that assignment does reveal itself. It really, truly is very personal. It's very passionate. It's armored and mobilized by something beyond us. And there's something I write in the book in the make meaning. There's 5 rules of resilience. Yeah. But the make meaning rule is where we really express longing, like the cry of our hearts. And I ask the question, what do we want? And like really, truly like deep in our bones, not like coffee and a walk, but like a good night's sleep, but deep in our longing selves, what do we want? And one of the things I say is we want the kind of work where we know that we have left a part of ourselves in it, where there's this calling and this invitation that says, I'm not just like, getting a monthly paycheck or punching a clock. Like I'm doing something that physically makes me come alive. And when I do it, I'm thinking I was made for this because there's something about it that is mobilized and animated by the Spirit. It invites me to walk in step with the Spirit, and it will always be infused with that strength and that hope and that meaning, because it's not coming from us. It's coming from a source beyond us. And I think that's a really sweet invitation as we navigate the not yet.
One thing you said that's worth people pausing on, you said death always precedes resurrection. And I'll say it a little bit differently, is there's no resurrection without a death before it. The only way the resurrection happens is with a death. I want to be super respectful of your time. Will you go, you mentioned the 5 rules for building a resilient life. You mentioned the make meaning. Can you hit on a few of the others right now to whatever, whatever extent you can?
Well, I'm I'm a linear person, like it all builds. So the first one is name the pain. And you just that's just therapy 101, got to get honest with pain. You cannot heal what is hidden. So you just got to bring it to the light. And the more we just get honest with God, with one another, it doesn't just require a therapist. I mean, you got to begin with God, because if you're not going to tell God this stuff, you are not going to tell another human this stuff. So start with that. And then the second rule, as a result of naming that pain, then now that it's out there, you can hear it and go, wow, I've really believed something with this pain. And maybe I need to do the second rule now, which is shift the narrative. So name the pain, shift the narrative, because my pain was I'm broken and I'm afraid I'll never change. And then all of a sudden Gabe meets me when I confess that and says, we're all broken. You're just more aware of it. And all of a sudden I'm met with grace. I'm met with compassion. I'm met with actually, you're not alone in this. And this is actually, with Christ, all things are redeemed. And it was just a sweet kind of like, okay, you're right. And so I started just researching, like, what have I believed and agreed with based on pain? And then what do I need to see differently? So name the pain, shift the narrative. Once you start to believe the truth that sets free and shifting that narrative, then you go to the third rule, which is embrace adversity. Nobody wants to embrace adversity, but when you've named the pain and you've shifted the narrative, all of a sudden adversity doesn't feel so intimidating. You do begin to get more comfortable with pain. And so there's a chapter in there called Treat Anxiety as a Friend. Nobody wants to think of it like that, but what it did for me is the friend that taught me resilience. It taught me how strong I am. It taught me how, when it returns, I now know what to do. I coach thousands and thousands of people on what to do when it returns. It's no longer the backyard bully that just gets really loud and intimidates me, and I'm afraid of how my body's going to respond. I have actual resiliency tools and techniques based in scripture that have helped me with every kind of form of a panic attack. Praise God. I would not have had that prior to all of this. Right. So name the pain, shift the narrative, embrace adversity. And the fourth one is make meaning. And that's where I now have purpose on the other side of this pain to help others. And then the final one is endure together. Name the pain, shift the narrative, make meaning, embrace adversity, and endure together, because we're not going to build resilient lives alone. This for sure goes back to what we talked at the beginning of the show, was that the historical way that we have always healed from trauma is being tethered to community. And so I talk a lot about building resilient communities, not just resilience in your own life and in your own marriage or your own family, but what does a household of faith look like, where you bear one another's burdens in love, you come around, everyone brings their gifts and their skills to the table, and you overlap in every area of life.
So good. We are going to let you go. I have one homework assignment for people, and then I want you to tell us one thing that people can implement today. My first thing, we're launching this episode on May 2nd, which is the date your book releases. So everybody go out and order, and we're going to give away some copies. We're buying some copies. We're going to give away copies as well. So that's my one thing you can do today. Go buy this book. And what's one thing today, Rebekah, as people are listening, what's one thing they can implement today walking away from this episode?
Yeah. So in the Name the Pain rule, the second chapter is called Invite Others In, and engage in a rhythm of confession is the third chapter. And I think if we start there, like with whatever you're navigating today that just feels heavy, maybe you're just carrying a burden and it's just in your brain and it's just kind of personalized to you, but you haven't really invited somebody else into that. You don't have to overshare everything, but it is important that you go to someone who's trusted, that you're not paying. I'm not talking about a counselor. I'm talking about a friend, a peer, a coworker, a colleague, someone where they're safe enough for you to go, like, I'm carrying something and I have been for a while and I just haven't had the freedom or permission to tell someone. And I would just love to invite you into this with me, to not fix me, but to be with me as I process this, and pray with me, or whatever it is. Invite somebody in, because when you get it out of your body and you get it out of your mind, all of a sudden you're able to have a better perspective of what it is. You feel less alone in it, and then you feel stronger. And not only do it one time, right? Don't do it to one time to like a stranger on the subway. Do it with someone you're in relationship with, that you're going to see often, so that you can then begin a rhythm of confession with that person, where they respond back with the things. A real relationship requires reciprocity. It's not one-sided, where one person's the project and the other person's the solution. Right. No, it's a mutual coming together and leading with vulnerability. And as a result of that, there's healing without even having to fix it. There's a real true healing just walking a storm with someone by your side.
We can all do that. Everybody listening, please go do that. Invite somebody in. Don't worry about the next steps. Just take that first step. Rebekah, where can people find your book? I'm sure everywhere, and then learn more about you. Where are a couple places we can direct them? Yeah, the best place would be my website, RebekahLyons.com. And it's spelled a little different, so I'm sure you'll put the link. It's RebekahLyons.com. You can go to a podcast I co-host with my husband, Rhythms for Life with Gabe and Rebekah Lyons, on all your podcast apps.
And yes, if you want to go to my website and even subscribe to all my updates, and we'll get to know each other real well. And I'll just encourage you every week or two and keep you updated on all new things that are coming out, resources that are free that you can have access to.
All of this we'll have in the show notes, and we'll be doing some giveaways. Please go buy a copy of Building a Resilient Life. Rebekah, thank you so much for coming on the Aro Podcast, and thank you. We're very, very grateful for you and your work, and I guess Gabe too. We're grateful for Gabe too,
Yeah,
I guess.
he's pretty great too.
He's
Thank
all right.
you. Thanks for having me. You have a great day.